Our next speaker.
You are welcome.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Boitumelo Motsisi-Mehlape. Doc is a state vet at the Department of Agriculture under the Directorate of Animal Health, Import and Export Policy Unit. She is responsible for the regulation of import and export of animals and their products. Today, she will be basically presenting on the regulatory export requirements to target a market for wool and mohair products. Please take it away, Doc.
Good morning, everyone. I'll start quickly by sharing my presentation.
Just a quick one to everyone. Whilst Doc is sharing her presentation, please kindly switch off your microphones and please be reminded to switch off your videos as well, as they tend to be slightly distracting to the presenter. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity, to present on this. I'll be taking you through the regulatory export requirements to target markets for wool and mohair products. So today we'll be looking at how to access export markets, specifically for wool and mohair. The requirements set by the World Organization for Animal Health for the inactivation of foot and mouth disease virus in this product for safe trading of the commodity. The challenges we face when we try to access the export markets and in countries where market for wool and mohair has been accessed. So the whole thing starts first by us getting the request, to export wool or mohair. So this normally will come, from a client, will be approached by Mr. Smith or Mr. Shabangu, telling us that he's interested in exporting, say, wool to China. I'll use those as an example. So the next step will be to see if we do have current trade agreements in place with China. That is, are we already exporting some commodities to this country? And then it can be that we already have those current trade agreements in place, or there are no current trade agreements in place. So in case we've got trade agreements in place, then South Africa will provide its disease status to the country that wants to import from us. And then that country, if the disease status of South Africa is favorable to them, they will draft a set of import requirements. And then if we cannot comply with those import requirements, then Mr. Smith, and we reach an agreement, then Mr. Smith, Mr. Shabangu can export their product to China. It can be that when we provide our disease status, the disease status is not favorable to the country that wants to import from us, then the next step will be for that country to do the risk assessment. So the risk assessment is a component of risk analysis. I didn't prepare the slides on this one because it's a bit technical. But risk assessment is component of risk analysis, and other components of risk analysis are hazard identification, risk assessment, risk management, and risk communication. And then the World Organization for Animal Health could provide the detailed steps on how to do a risk analysis. So basically, risk analysis is a process of estimating the probability and impact of a particular risk associated with importing a particular commodity into a country. It aims at answering these three questions. What can go wrong if we allow the importation of this wool from South Africa? What is likely to happen? And then what are the consequences if anything, goes wrong? And then what is the severity of the impact if, anything goes wrong? So now the next step of the first step of risk analysis will be to identify the hazard. So in the case of the wool, the hazard that we are looking at is the diseases that can be transmitted, through this product. And then the ones that the code has listed is foot and mouth disease, is Pestades pestis ruminantis, PPR, sheep and goat pox, and anthrax. So this process will identify the hazard to check if the hazard is present in the exporting country. So they'll be doing their risk assessment before they can allow the importation of wool. They will check, do we have those hazards that we have identified? Does South Africa have them? And then does those hazards affect the animal species being imported or from which the commodity is derived, you know? And then can this hazard be introduced in the country? If the country is doing this risk assessment and they don't identify any hazard, then there's no need for them to continue with the risk assessment. But in case that when they do the risk assessment, they've identified some hazard, then the next step will be to go through the 4 steps of risk assessment, which are entry assessment, exposure assessment, consequences assessment, and risk estimation. So with the entry assessment, basically this process describes the probability of entry of the hazard in question. So if they allow the importation of wool from this country that is not free of FMD, what is the probability of foot and mouth entering the country through importing this product? They will look at exposure assessment. It looks at the probability of the susceptible animal coming into contact with the hazard. China will check, do we have animals that are susceptible to FMD? And then what is the probability of these susceptible animals coming or being exposed to this wool that is being imported into the country? And then they will also look at the consequences assessment, which identifies the possible biological, environmental, and economic consequences associated with the introduction, establishment, and spread of the hazard. So if they allow this import, and then maybe then eventually it leads to the outbreak. So what will be the consequences? Like if that FMD now gets established and then it gets to spread in the country. Then the last steps is risk estimation, risk management, and risk communication. And risk communication is all the findings of the risk analysis will have to be communicated to the decision makers and interested parties in the importing and exporting countries. So basically that's the whole step of doing the risk analysis, with one of the components being the risk assessment. So when they are done with this process, you find like the risk is acceptable, then the next step will be for the country to draft the import requirements, send them to the country that wants to export, and then we'll follow this route. And then if the agreement is reached, then the export can take place. It can be that when they draft the import requirements, that those requirements are ridiculous, you know, South Africa cannot comply with them. That will lead to us even to negotiate, you know, the requirements that we can agree with. So the example that I can give here, you'll find like maybe the country is just saying like, no, we can only import if the country is free of FMD, and then like we're not free of FMD. Then we can go back to the code and see what recommendations have the code given to mitigate the risk if like you're not free of FMD, and then like we can negotiate those alternative clauses to the country. And then if we agree on that, we will follow that route, and then the export can take place. The other scenario can be that after we have received the export to the request to export wool to wherever, we find like we don't have current trade agreements in that place. That means we're not trading with that country on anything. So then the first thing that country will have to establish the contact details of the Veterinary Authority of South Africa, as that is the country that will be intending to export to them. And then from there, the next step will be for the country to evaluate the Veterinary Service of South Africa to see, like, if you know, if they can trust us, like, they trust our control measures that are in place and all that. And then the next step will be in evaluating the country, the Veterinary Service of the country. They normally send the questionnaire. We complete that questionnaire. The next step, other countries will insist on the inspection visit. Others, you know, just after doing the evaluation of the questionnaire, you know, they'll be happy, you know, maybe with the vet services, but others will still insist on doing the inspection visit. And then all these things are aimed at evaluating the veterinary services of the country that wants to export. Once the evaluation has been done, if the results are acceptable to the importing country, then we'll follow the steps, you know, whereby the import requirements will be drafted. If we comply, then the export can take place. It can be that when they were evaluating the Veterinary Service of South Africa, they are not happy, you know, with the end, what they found. And then in that case, the export cannot take place. It can be that when they were doing the risk assessment, they found like the risk is too high. In that case, the export cannot take place. And then it can be that when the import requirements were being negotiated, agreement was not reached. And then also that would be a stumbling block, then export cannot take place. Normally when we reach this stage and then, you know, the industry is pushing and all that, then that's where sometimes we'll follow we'll follow the diplomatic channel, you know, in trying, you know, to continue with the negotiations further. That sounded like that. Am I still audible?
You're
I hear some
audible.
distraction. Okay, thanks.
Please kindly switch off all your microphones. Okay, you can continue, Doc. Apologies.
Okay, thanks. So here, these are the procedures.
Hello, Doc. I think we've lost you. We cannot hear you. Doc? Okay, I think we have lost her a bit. So can we give her just 1 minute? Doc, any luck from your side?
We lost the speaker.
We have lost the speaker. Okay. I think we can pause her presentation for now. I know she has taken quite a bit and presenting on basically some of the requirements that are required from the department side. But I think I will just swiftly move on to our next speaker.
Apparently she's muted.
Oh, her mic is muted. Okay, let's wait for her a bit before we move on. Doc, can you hear me?
And I'm trying to search her so that I am unmute her.
Okay, I managed to unmute.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, sorry about that. You muted me there.
Okay, apologies for that.
Okay. Okay, then yeah, I was still explaining about the procedures for inactivating the FMD virus in wool. These are the recommendations provided by the WOA. The first one is for when you want to export your processed wool. So the wool must be subjected to industrial scouring, which consists of the immersion of wool in water, soluble detergent, and then the wool will be held at a temperature of 60 to 70 degrees Celsius. The second one, this is for exporting raw wool, and then this is the method that we're using, you know, for exporting wool to China, because that wool doesn't have the agreement that we reached with China, that wool doesn't have to be scoured. So it just have to be stored at 4 degrees Celsius for 4 months, or for 4 weeks at 18 degrees Celsius, or for 8 days at 37 degrees Celsius. These are scientific methods that have been proven that if the wool is being held this way or treated this way, they will be able to inactivate the FMD virus. So there won't be any risk of exporting FMD, you know, to China. So the challenges that we normally face is the disease outbreaks. The example that I've given, you find like we've got FMD outbreak, and then the country tries to be difficult, like, no, we can only take wool if the country is free of FMD. But going back to my previous slide, we can negotiate with them, showing that, like, even if the country is not free of FMD, the codes made this recommendation, and when we can apply this ones,
Look,
and it has been scientifically proven.
You know, there is a letter.
Maluta, thank you.
And then like we can negotiate with them. Like even though we've got an outbreak of this disease, we can still be able to export. But like I mentioned in my other slide, FMD is not only the hazard that we look at. We've got other hazards like your PPR, sheep and goat pox disease, and anthrax. So regarding PPR and sheep and goat pox, fortunately now we still. Fortunate in the sense that South Africa is free of those diseases. And then if you check in the code, for those ones, especially sheep and goat pox, the requirement is that, the wool must be coming from a country that is free of sheep and goat pox. So I'm just giving an example. If we can get that outbreak, that's where we're going to have a challenge, of exporting wool or mohair to wherever we want to export to. And then the other thing is unreasonable import condition. The example that I've just given about FMD, some will still insist that no, we want the country to be free of FMD, even though, there are some measures that can be employed, to mitigate the risk. And then the third challenge is lack of response. We are the office whereby we have to negotiate, with our trade partners. But some of the challenges that we get is that you will write to them, and then you will never get to hear back from them. And then these are the countries, when I was checking with our provincial statement, these are the countries that we currently exporting wool and mohair to. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Doc, for that presentation. I am going to allow for a few questions, burning questions, if there are any, for Doc. I know that there was a huge issue with FMD breakout last year, but I believe there was a great assistance. If anything, it was swift assistance from the department side, together working with industry, which proves to show that working together actually proves for good results. I hope, Doc, or rather, are there any initiatives in hand that are basically set so that we don't face similar issues that we faced last year? I know there's going to be disease outbreaks now and again, but are there lessons learned from the FMD that was basically that broke out last year? There was a hand from Balisa as well. Balisa, you can raise your question.
No, I'm sorted. Sorry about that. Thank you.
No problem. Okay,
okay.
I think mine is the only one. Yeah.
Yeah, no, just to answer that one. Yes, it's not only last year. This whole thing started around. Remember, we lost our FMD free status in 2019. Prior to that, export of wool, especially to China, because I think that's where we've got a big market for wool. So prior to that, China did not require, to have our establishment that are exporting to China to be ZA approved, And then after that outbreak, they stopped the exports and all that. And then like with the help of the industry, we managed to negotiate something. But now with China, we've got a wool protocol, that they drafted, they sent to us. Basically, they've included, the requirements that we need to comply with in that protocol. And then our minister signed the protocol sometime last year, towards the end of last year. And then that protocol is in place for 5 years. And it will be reviewed, every 5 years. So and then that's where, if you look at those two requirements that are highlighted, that are coming from the OA, that for China, we're using that storage of wool for say 8 days, for 4 months, at recommended temperatures. So those are the ones that are really included in that protocol, meaning that even though South Africa, we're not free of FMD, so that should not affect the export of greasy wool to China, because the code has made those recommendations. So for export to China, for now, we covered. We've got that wool protocol that has been signed by our ministers. We checked it before it was signed. And then, yeah, I don't think we'll ever get any challenges despite the FMD situation in the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. I think I will commend platforms such as this as well for everyone so that they note how much of work goes on in the background. I think a lot of people don't understand what or how much of work it takes to actually keep the markets that you have kept, and also to have if there are outbreaks such as these, to basically get to them as swiftly as you have done. So I think there's a lot of work that is being done by the department together with the industries. Thank you very much for that.